All right, all right. Well, welcome everybody to the role of AI in modernizing enterprise application security webcast. My name is Zach Moreno. I'm one of the consulting directors here at Bishop Fox, and with me today is Jonathan Urema, also a managing consultant of consulting here at Bishop Fox. How are you today, John?
I am doing just peachy. How are you?
Oh, I am fantastic. So today we're here to talk about one of my favorite topics, and I'm not being facetious with that. Enterprise application security, enterprise security in general has been kind of a huge cornerstone of my career. Uh, I was actually involved in it before I was actually officially in a security role many roles ago. But then as I kind of continued my security journey, this has been a kind of cornerstone of it. And so this is really near and dear to my heart. And so it's something I definitely love talking about. So we've got a few things we want to kind of talk about today. One, we want to talk about the challenges that are facing modern or enterprise security as a whole, some of the challenges that we face, and then kind of talk about how AI is helping to transform and helping to change how we go about approaching security. Um, AI is it's not just a buzzword, right? I think AI is not a fad that's going to come and go. I think it's going to be a persistent part of the future for us. And I think if you are using it correctly, it can be a very powerful tool, right? If you use it incorrectly, it can also be very bad, right? So I think that's why you got to be thoughtful with how you approach it. And I think it's the same thing with any tool, right? You got to be thoughtful in your approach. It's not just something you can turn on and it's going to solve everything for you. At least kind of that's what I've seen. So when we kind of take a step back, the reality that's facing modern enterprises today is you have tons of applications. If you're a relatively newer enterprise, right, you may not have as many, but we're talking hundreds to thousands potentially of applications that were developed over years. You may still have legacy applications that have been running since the mid 90s. You have mergers and acquisitions, and overall the complexity kind of just increases. um, there's also microservices, APIs, integrations with third parties. Kind of as you mature, the overall complexity of the environment just increases, right? Brand new technologies are becoming are constantly coming into development, and so teams are deploying the latest thing, right? So like for how long people were setting their sights on SQL, and then stuff like NoSQL comes out, MongoDB comes out, like all these new database technologies come out, apps start moving to it because it fits their use cases. And so the security approach might change a little bit, stuff like that. And then also distributed ownership. That's also something that is kind of challenging for enterprises. I know for me, in one of my old previous roles, I was responsible for kind of being the security liaison for a lot of teams. And you would have one team own the database, right? You'd have a team of DBAs and you'd have one person who was responsible for the database for your application. But the team that was responsible for the underlying infrastructure was a completely different team. And then you had a team that was responsible for the code base. And then you had a team that was responsible for the maintenance of the application, right? So you have vulnerabilities that come in. They may be coming from your DAS scanning. It may be coming from your pen testing. It may be coming from your infrastructure scanning, and figuring out kind of like who owns what, who's responsible for what is kind of difficult. And then you also look at just the speed at which we are coding, right? Security should obviously be a logic gate, but you also need to find a balance of allowing things to move forward, right? While keeping things secure. We can't just fly by the seat of our pants, constantly release code without some sort of security logic in there. But it can't be, you only get one security audit per year, so you just get to release code once per year, right? Stuff like that just doesn't quite work. So older security models don't necessarily translate well into modern environments. Is there anything I missed on that in terms of like some of the challenges that we're facing, or do you think I covered it all pretty well?
I think that's a lot of it. I mean, you're also looking at like you said, the developments, new technologies coming in. It's really difficult to keep up with all the new design patterns and then the various vulnerabilities that come along with it. So it's like massively broad and then complex at the same time,
Mhm.
spanning like, tens of years of technology as it's changed.
Yeah, well, and then especially, I don't know about you, John, if you ever had an instance where there was like one person who knew how to maintain the application, or one person who still wrote Perl, right? I'm not throwing any digs at Perl. I know a lot of people who love it. I used to code in it as well, but like sometimes you run into issues where you have that person who knew how to do DB2 and nobody else on the team knew how to handle DB2. So they were the person to fix it, right? So, like, kind of going back to the whole legacy argument where you have legacy applications, legacy technology. That's, again, not that Perl's legacy, but if everybody's developing in Python and you still have an application run like with scripts running in Perl and stuff like that that are key to your workflow, that becomes a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I used to see that in mainframe. I worked for an organization that had tons and tons of their ordering processes on a mainframe. Made it very difficult to, well, first of all, get off that, but there were also only a handful of people who really understood it. So there was kind of like that
Yeah.
knowledge was really siloed in a handful of people, but it was super important for the functioning of like the core business processes, which was like getting orders out the door.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why I brought up the DB2 aspect, because I was thinking of my old time with a financial institution and the mainframes and how that was, you had the people who knew it and knew it well, but a lot of the newer folks coming into the organization didn't. So that became a challenge. So kind of with those in mind, right? We have testing can kind of break down. I think, or your application security testing can kind of break down against those challenges, right? So, like, you may have unknown apps, you may have shadow APIs. I mean, John, in our testing, how many times have we gotten a pretty nice vulnerability because an old version of an API endpoint was still active? And then we talk to the developer and they're like, oh, well, we fixed that in V2, but we had to leave V1 active because of X, Y, and Z reason, right? They had a good reason for leaving it out there, but it was exploitable, and exactly what we did. Like, I know I've seen it a handful of times. I'm sure you've probably seen it a bunch.
Yep. Yep.
So things,
Endpoint didn't even know that we're in there, right? Somehow they were developed for some, purpose early on, and then they're still being deployed either in old versions or just kind of missed because there's no
yeah,
UI component that calls it, right? And so we kind of forgot about it, and then we find it.
yeah. Well, and how about apps that are not officially in your app catalog, right? They're an internal app that may be exposed externally to the internet, but it's not like a product, right? You have your own. Not. I've never claimed I was the best developer, but I know that I may or may not have stood up some applications in my time that were for internal use. It should have just been for me and my team, and I spun up the web app. And I threw silly things in there like if user equals admin, go ahead and show the admin panel. Like I did that long ago, long ago before I put on my security hat. But my app was not in the official app database for the company, but it was still present on the network. It was still on servers that hosted critical applications to the operations of the infrastructure. So how do unknown apps affect your overall security portfolio, right? How do they
Right.
affect your security program?
Yeah. I mean, just from anecdotally speaking, a lot of times those older apps or those like Skunkworks apps or whatever, they're going to be sitting there maybe out on. Hopefully, it's just on your intranet, right? Like you're just gonna
Mhm.
you've narrowed the exposure there, but a lot of times those applications are sitting on like a shared SQL server or something like that, right? So. How many times have I actually seen when I was a developer back in the day? I wasn't a very good one, but I did it. And how many times were you like logging in with SA or some higher privileged administrative account so that when one of these kind of corny apps that someone wrote and was trying it out and kind of learning a technology, it gets popped with SQLi, but all of a sudden now that that vulnerability leads to the exploiting of not just that database, but all like the pure databases that it was overprivileged to have access to. So yeah, I've very much seen that before. I've seen it in the pen testing role before, getting into one database, which leads to another. In those other, you report it, and it's like, we didn't even know that thing was there, right? And now you got access to it. It was like sensitive data or something. Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. So kind of with that in mind, if you had I'm gonna kind of flip this question on you, right? So if you had a huge portfolio of applications that needed testing, how would you approach prioritization and assessment of those targets, right? Given what we have available to us now.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly there's like a prioritization that you'd want to do. I'd probably be prioritizing external, but then after going external, you go internal because you're exposed to the world. But we're talking about like the use cases of AI, and certainly there's going to be the functions of like scanning and testing that are going to occur, and you're seeing this kind of pop up all over the place. That's to me what I would be looking for is do a broad sweep of everything that's out there. And I think we're going to get into this a little bit more, but as we start using agents for testing and as we start realizing the power of what AI can do, it's not just what it can do in a test, but also provide feedback. I really like the idea of identifying assets and creating summaries, instructing agents or these tools to create summaries, because I want to go back to them. I want to go back to them, and I want to say, for those applications, make sure that you grab all the JS files, all the JavaScript files that you see out there, because later on, I want you to say, hey, parse all those, and then look for any ones that look like they're administrative, right? So not only is it, I want to get a baseline of everything that's out there, but I want that to feed into something that's going to allow me to have the human prioritize it. It can help me, the AI can help you, but I want to then be able to have it spit out data that's going to allow me to pick out my next targets and make sure that I'm closing up those holes, the ones that are like triage, right? Closing the ones that are hurting the worst.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you kind of actually hit on some of the other pieces that are, where testing breaks down, right? I think one of the things we need to look at too, not just figuring out what needs to be tested, but like if you have a huge portfolio of applications, right? You have a massive portfolio of applications and you have a bunch of, looking at it on a scale, you have a bunch that are really high risk, really high severity. They may have sensitive client data. They're exposed externally. They're critical to business function, right? If they go down, it costs the company money. And then your priority kind of lessens as the risk kind of goes down as well. But that doesn't mean that long tail over here is not still worthy of testing, right? You still need to hit these apps because collectively that's still quite a bit of risk, even if they're not as it's not a flashy vuln, right? You pop the flagship application with SQL injection and you get the database. You've probably got credit card numbers, you've got emails, you've got all this stuff. But down here where this might not be tested as frequently, it might still have a shared component. It might be on a shared database cluster. And if the permissions on the cluster aren't configured correctly, or you breach the batch service that's running, that processes the jobs, that do the bank transfers and all that stuff, and all the the reporting jobs that run at the end of the night, right? It's the shared components. Now, they may not have been the target for the testing team because the testing team had a limited budget, and limited time. Let's be honest, if you have 500 applications and you have a team of 10 testers, if you want to get any good coverage, right, you've got probably let's say one tester a week for good coverage, depending on how big the application. Your flagship's probably going to need a couple more weeks, but for most applications but if I have 500 apps, I need 500 weeks of testing. Minimum.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have something that can scale. You brought up the shared components again. I mean, that's a foothold. When you're testing something,
it's a pivot, right?
Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, really, am I going to go and look for the well-updated commercial off-the-shelf product if I'm trying to get in, or am I going to look for, John Urema, 15 years ago wrote some,
Yeah.
bad book and put it out there, right? I'm going after that one, right? Because I know that it looks old. It looks, oh, it's just, super dated and probably was built off some, really poor, design pattern. And so that's what I'm going after because I know that I'm going to have a higher likelihood. So bad guys have the same thing in mind is they've got limited resources too. And so they have to say, what's the most bang for the buck? And it's almost kind of like an inverse of what we care about because they know that a foothold can be just as important as popping a big system that's business critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if it's easier for me to hit those lesser tested systems, right? Yeah. And there's a chance of me getting that foothold into the stronger system, like that's worth it, right? It's going to take me less time. And then I could potentially be a bigger payout than slamming my head repeatedly against a well-tested, well-reviewed wall, right? Because companies today will also leverage bug bounty, right, against their flagship application. So you've got people constantly looking at it and hammering it. So you almost kind of like, it's going to be a much more difficult target, right? So, kind of with these things in mind, some of the things that I think enterprise really needs is scalable execution, right? It's the long tail effect that we were kind of talking about, where you have the high risk and then you have all these ones down here, but that long tail is dangerous. All these other apps over here can be dangerous. I'm not saying they are, right? Some of these may just be static pages. Some of these may just be little things that have no shared components. They're segmented off somewhere else. But all it takes is one, right? And it's probably a good idea to have a good view into the overall security of those. We didn't touch on this too much, but also I think consistent methodology. One of the things that we've done as consulting leaders here is work to ensure that we are applying our methodology consistently, right? That we are constantly doing it. But, and that's why we have playbooks. We have a lot of stuff to help make sure our testers are looking at things consistently, looking at things the right way. But, that's not always going to be the same thing across all consulting companies, all penetration testing vendors. We may look for things a certain way, and another organization may look for things a certain way. Your internal team may not know how to look for things a certain way, right? So if you have a mix of testing, you're going to get in different methodology, right? Not that anyone's better than the other or any of them are off. It's just that you're going to have different eyes looking at it. In the same way that you and I can both go into the same app and we might notice different things, right? We'll get to the same vulnerability eventually, but I may have come in through a business logic flaw, whereas you saw a different way to get that SQL injection, right? So it's going to be different ways of looking at it. And then I think, especially for a business an enterprise that is maturing their overall organization, they have their SaaS and DaaS scanning, they have their third-party integration scanning. There's so much noise, right? There's so much noise just coming at them, and then mix in pen testing reports, and then mix in, the pressure coming from up top saying, hey, we need to make sure that everything is secure. Oh, don't forget, we also have an audit coming up. So there's just a lot of noise and direction coming from different ways. And it's tough to kind of figure out what's important, figure out what should I focus on as a person. And, I speak from experience because I've been in that situation where I've had all the results coming in from my tooling, and I had to then go ahead and make sure that, okay, well, these are false positives I know across the bat. I know this is just kind of a noise that the scanner likes to pick up on, and this particular pen tester likes to report things this way. And it can kind of become a challenge, right?
And as you were talking about that, we're talking about how do we use AI to help alleviate some of those big issues? And one thing that you got to be careful about with AI is it can crunch so much data that it can just crush you with the volume of data that it can give back. So, when I think about the amount of sources of information, on the flip side of it providing too much data, it can also process a lot of data really well. So being able to use artificial intelligence to examine large quantities of data, providing it parameters, right? Saying hey, the purpose of our exercise, so we're going to configure something, right? We're going to say the purpose of our exercise is to look at all of these results. And I want you to look for patterns. And I want you to break out all of the targets that you see. And I want you to start correlating the vulnerabilities that you see. It's really incredible how well it can sift through lots and lots of data and then provide you summaries. So I think that that's going to be one area that we're going to see more and more, is just taking data, putting it together, and having it do its good summary thing and have it meaningful. The data that comes out being meaningful, right? Because you don't want it to like hit you with 3 gigs of text. What are you going to do with that? It's impossible to dig through that. I want a table, and I want you to know the parameters. I want you, AI, to know the parameters of what I'm looking for, so you can help summarize that and prioritize the information that comes out for me.
Well, and so you kind of just hit on it, right? I think you hit on the big point that we kind of brought up at the top of the webcast, is that AI is a force multiplier, right? AI is going to be really solid at helping you expand your skill set. It's going to help take what you do really well and expand your reach, right? It's a force multiplier. It's not a replacement. We're seeing it now with consultants here at Bishop Fox. Many of them are using AI to help them develop tooling that augments their skill sets, right? And none of this is new. This core concept is not new. Technology professionals have been automating their jobs for a long time. Ever since scripting became a thing, technology professionals have been automating their jobs so they can focus on the things that actually matter and actually move the needle. The key difference being is that now when I'm developing these scripts, when I'm developing these things to help me further my job, I don't have to build in all the logic. I can give AI the parameters, and especially if my tooling is leveraging AI in the background, it can also help think, right? So like back in the day when we would script things, it would work, and then in 2 weeks it would break because there was this edge case that we didn't think about. So then we got to go check our logs, and it broke because this was because of this CVE that came across in this text file. Okay, so now I got to add another case. I got to add another logical step to my flow. But if I have AI, if I have a large language model built into my tooling that says, hey, talk me through your reasoning. You can make a decision, but knowing that these are the parameters for what we want to do, I would like you to go ahead and make a decision. And your tool can then, I don't want to say think, but it can help reason its way through a problem. Now, you still need to check it, right? You still need to validate that things are working the way they should, but it can help reason. And this is a game changer, right? So, and now I don't have to spend 2 months developing that script and all the edge cases to do it. I can have Claude Code do it for me in an afternoon, and I can be up and running. Like, this is huge. How have you seen consultants leveraging AI?
Yeah, that's I think the big thing that I'm seeing now is the agentic approach. In when like go back to 2023, let's say, and we got like some, it's come so far, but like maybe it's like ChatGPT or something like that. It was, at first you're like, how do I use this? Everyone's telling me that it's going to be the greatest thing, and you're like, it's kind of a super Google, right? And then you go, it can sort of summarize things, and it can kind of teach me a concept real quick. But putting like the pieces together to be like, make me be faster, quicker kind of thing. That was a little bit, that was not understood as well. And how to apply it, I guess, would be a good way to say it. Like, where do you go from there? And really, I think the answer is like agentic, especially for people who are doing like offensive security or even developers. If you're using agentic AI to do things for you, it's not like you're sending out, the cyborgs or whatever from Terminator 2. It's actually kind of like having a really good coworker next to you, who doesn't get tired and can do things faster than you. They just need to be instructed really well. So that's where I'm seeing it, is using agents to do work that you already could do, but it can do it faster and
Hmm.
it can do it more thoroughly. And then if you configure it, meaning if you prompt it, if you tell it who it is, and if you teach it principles of what it's trying to do. So instead of saying, like, here's would be a bad example, go pen test the thing for me, pentestexample.com or whatever. Like it might do something and maybe throw some errors, but like, did you really do anything? Right? As opposed to setting up an agent where you say, hey, you're a really solid web application pen tester. You have 15 years of experience. I want you to make sure that you understand all the major vulnerabilities out there. I want you to go through this methodology that you'll find in this folder here, because I'm going to run this locally, this agent locally. I want you to make sure that if you ever send a request out, agents, right, my little buddy coworker here, that you always send it out through a proxy like Burp, right? So there's always, because we're going to be responsible for every packet that we send. So we're always going to have that. And then you teach it what you want it to do. And then as you go through and you say, okay, agent, now start doing the thing, and make sure that you keep really good logs of it so there's full accountability. You kind of like go, oh, I didn't really explain it very well. I better instruct you a little better on what my actual process is. It actually causes you as the offensive security person or the developer or whatever you're using it for to really learn how to articulate your process. And what we've been finding is the better we can articulate what we want the thing to do, the better it does it. And like Zach was saying before, is there's still that level of accountability, like trust but verify, but the better we're describing it, the better results we're getting. And that's where like it feels like magic, but really what it's doing is it's just following what you already know, right? Like what you already taught it. It's kind of like it's as good as you are, right? It's actually
exactly.
Amplifier. It's total amplification. So yeah, if you're really good at something, it's going to make you that much better. If you're not really good at something, it's going to sort of highlight your deficiencies.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually had a couple questions come in that I think are kind of relevant to kind of our conversation at this moment. So the first one we have is, will AI replace pen testers? So I don't have a crystal ball. I can't say what AI is going to look like in 20 years and 30 years. My answer right now is no. I do not foresee it replacing pen testers. I think you can get some good results. So good could be a strong word, but I don't think it's ever going to, at least in its current form and what I foresee it kind of doing over a bit. I don't foresee it replacing. I think if anything, the jobs are going to shift a little bit, and shift in terms of like, you may be more like, it might behoove you to learn a bit more about prompting and building up tooling and coding and stuff like that, in addition to your security skill set. I think that is where we might see shifts, but I don't foresee it replacing headcount. I don't foresee it taking jobs away. It's just going to shift them. It's just going to change them a little bit. Because like we were talking about, where we are seeing it work really well is in the augmentation, right? Whether it's Cosmos AI, whether it's the tooling that people are developing, right? It's the augmentation and the human element that's still there that makes it powerful. It by itself, it's good. It's very good in certain contexts as long as you're giving it the right prompt. But I can't see it replacing people.
So, and I used to be right there. I think everyone, if we're being honest, would be like, oh no, right? If you're a knowledge worker, and that's what a lot of people in the information security world are knowledge workers. You know something, and people pay you to pull that information out of your head and apply it, right? That's fundamentally what it is. And you're like, holy cow, this is like genie over here, this like crystal ball of knowledge of everything. I used to be kind of like, well, what's going to happen there? And I'm feeling less and less concerned about that. And the reason why is what I said before. It's as good as you are. So instead of thinking about it as like this like I said, the Terminator 2s, like they go and they're just like these killing machines just doing everything. Think about it as like, and actually our CEO used to refer to it like this, is like Iron Man suits, right? When Iron Man would hop in the suit, I mean, he was just like a normal dude. And then he would hop in the suit and he'd talk to his, what was that guy's name?
Jarvis.
Jarvis, yeah, we talked to
Yeah.
Jarvis. You're like, Jarvis, tell me, do I got like missiles coming at me? And you're like, yes, sir. We got to do. Well, what do you think we should do? I think we should deploy something, right? And say, everything would be cool, and then New York City would blow up, and then things were fine. But think of it as like an exoskeleton. So the question, like, are our jobs going to go away? I think your job's going to go away if you don't know how to use it, because I
Yeah.
think that everyone needs to know how to use it the right way. And it's not a replacement of knowledge. It's not a replacement of knowing how, like really knowing a process or a methodology, being able to teach it, to be able to tell the thing what to do. You don't want to say, go and do things. You don't want to just give
Yeah.
generic examples. You want to say, I want you to look at the technology, agent that our target is using. Oh, you say it's Spring Boot. Is there any sort of vulnerabilities that I should know about Spring Boot? And they'll be like, oh yeah, check for actuators or whatever it is. Oh, I don't know what actuators are. What would you look for, agent? And then, right. And so then it goes, here's a sample list. Should I build out a set of requests? Yeah, send a set of requests to that. Make sure you're not changing anything. So that's kind of what I see is like, you still have to do all the work. You just got to climb into that exoskeleton or that mech or whatever, and you're going to run further and cover more. And have more, like those superhuman powers, but fundamentally, you're driving the machine. So, like, I thought about this before too. Like, if I was stuck in the cockpit of like a race car or something like that, I don't know anything about cars. I know how to drive. That's about it. But if you stuck me in the cockpit of a race car, like I could drive it, but like I wouldn't really get any performance out of it. But if you stuck a professional driver in there, they would get everything out of it. So think about that, like. You're going to get out of the machine your level of skill is what I think.
Exactly. Are you familiar with OpenClaw and personal AI assistants? Have you seen much of those, John?
I mean, I looked at it once and I giggled a little bit, and then I don't know.
Yeah.
I have too much work to do.
Exactly. So we have a question about particularly how do you see it introducing new attack surfaces? And I think it's nothing new. I kind of talked about this on our Bishop Fox podcast a couple weeks ago. I don't know. 2026 has been a blur. I don't remember how many weeks ago, but it was this year. We talked about it. And like I think it's cool. I think it's a cool tool. I've been playing with the idea of throwing it onto a Mac Mini, segmented in my own little home network, right, and just seeing what it can do. And so like speaking on like the introduction of new vulnerabilities, like I think you wouldn't want to roll this out into your production GCP or AWS instance and just like give it access to everything and let it do stuff for you. But I'm not saying you shouldn't leverage these personal AI assistants, these things like that, because I think that can be very useful. But if you don't know what the code is doing on the underside and stuff like that, if you're not familiar with the request that it's making, like I think it's worthwhile to, we talk about all the time, trust but verify. It's I think it can be an extremely powerful tool, right? So I'm not trying to poo-poo on OpenClaw. I'm not trying to say like that. Like I think it's actually very cool. I think it's just a very powerful tool, and things can go awry if you aren't sure what you're doing with it, right? If you just set it up and give it full access, yeah, you're adding potential vulnerabilities into your environment, especially if you put it on, like we talked about earlier, like shared infrastructure with stuff that's actually valuable to you, right? You may be like, oh, well, I'm just going to give it some test keys. But if it's running in the same place where you have other valuable things going, things could get a little hairy. It's like when the Dodge Hellcats first came out, right? And people were like wrecking them just leaving the dealership because they didn't know how to handle that much power, right? It's a cool tool to have. It's cool to have that much power, but if you don't know how to handle it, you don't know how to appropriately use it, things can go sideways, and no pun intended, but you can go sideways in OpenClaw or your Hellcat.
And that's why I don't own a Hellcat. Yeah, that's a really good point that you just made there. The idea of accountability, I think, is really important to consider when you're using any sort of like assistant. And I'm kind of throwing agents in there too, right? I mean, it's writing code and executing it. So like, thinking about if I'm going to run Python, if I'm going to have my agent build a Python POC, well, am I going to just let it go out and get like modules from anywhere? Or am I going to say, only use the modules from trusted sources or run it in a virtual environment? The other thing too, when you're thinking about like from an offensive security side or even development side, is you're responsible for every packet that leaves your
Yeah.
computer, especially as an offensive security professional. And I think that the more you spend time configuring the tool, the more you spend time telling the agent what to do, your assistant buddy, um, the more you're going to realize how much you want to build that accountability in, right? Like
Mhm.
one of the things I want you to do, agent, right? We're configuring an agent, is I want you to uh, summarize why you took an action based off my input when we're talking, right? Because we're sitting here working together, we're talking, and then I want you to document what you did. And if you wrote some code or if you sent a request, I want you to keep a running summary of what you did throughout the day. Because essentially what it does is kind of what I had to do. So like ultimately I'm the
Mhm.
one sort of responsible for that. Running everything through a proxy, super important. Making sure you stay in scope. I mean, how terrible is it if you're like, giving someone a free pen test? I think that's actually sends you to
Yeah.
jail. So you
Yeah.
gotta be careful about that. So all of those things, you want to actually build those borders around it
Yeah.
to make sure that you have that accountability, that you have all those. Don't send requests if you're questioning if it's out of scope. Make sure you pause and ask me, and you build those things into your processes.
Well, and that's exactly why, with Cosmos AI, I kind of mentioned this briefly. Um, the big thing about it is the human in the loop, right?
Mhm.
What we're doing is we have our AI assisted engine that's sitting there running, and it's looking at the application, it's trying to test it, and it's generating findings for us. But, we're not just going to turn that over, right? Because we still want to make sure that it's matching the quality that we expect to come out of it. So that's why, like, I know for us here at Bishop Fox, when we developed Cosmos AI and when we started deploying with clients, the human's always in the loop, right? You're getting testers as well as the Cosmos AI tool or agent, so that we can go out and do the testing. But then we're still looking for stuff. We're still testing. We're still doing it, and then we're looking at the findings that are coming back and taking it. And I think that's kind of like one of the key things that I'm really proud of, like the way that we built it, right? Not trying to be here and be like, "Ooh, Cosmos AI," right? But it's like it's actually a really smart way that we approached it. That has really, I think, it's had real impactful. It's been a really impactful approach for us, keeping the human in the loop, because we're not just going to let it loose. We're going to make sure that our humans are still validating, and I think that's where it works out best. It's like we talk about. Um, you know it, it's important to keep the human there to augment them and to allow them, this has always been the case, right? Just like burp scanner was never going to replace a pen tester, right? Burp scanner is going to be good. The active scanner is going to be great. It's going to find stuff. It's going to find stuff that scanners do well. And I look at AI agents and tools as taking that a step further, because like we talked about, they can apply some logic. They can work within the bounds that you give them, and they can be like, oh, well, I see this, so let me go ahead and try to exploit that. Let me go ahead and try to get this admin escalation, right? Um, but just, and it's going to really do a really good job of finding that at scale, right? Kind of going back to the whole, what do enterprise need and how can AI help bridge that gap, right? It helps us be scalable, because now instead of having, we talked about I would need 500 weeks of work to test all the apps if I gave every app a week. Well, now if I can maybe do, let's be conservative with it. If I could do 5 apps in a week, well, now my testers, if I have 10 testers, I can potentially do 50 apps in a week. Let's say 3 apps. Let's just say we can do 3 apps at a time. I can now do 30 apps, right? And that just completely expands my portfolio, how much of it I'm going to be able to get to, right? Because it's allowing the human to focus on what the human does best, while the AI does what the AI can do best. And I think that's the key thing to keep in mind, and that's, for me, the appropriate way to approach it. I don't know about you.
Different tools for different purposes. You have to have something
Yeah.
to cast a wide net, and then you have to have precision tools for digging into very nuanced issues.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of to wrap up this conversation, right? I think it helps. Like AI will help to give you the coverage, and keeping the human in the loop gives you the confidence, right, to tell you what actually matters, to tell you what's actually there. And that's again just why like I think Cosmos AI is such a cool thing that we're steadily rolling out. That we're keeping. I'm so happy to be a part of it. Right, we got testers that are there validating those results and making sure that stuff gets through. So, any final thoughts from your side, John?
A final thought to me is, humans are still important. A lot of questions about what role do we play in all this, and I hope that it's been clear that it's an amplifier of humans. It's adjunct to humans. It helps us to amplify our existing skill sets, cast wider nets, but certainly people. We're not heading toward that dystopia, I don't believe.
Yeah.
It's people are going to still be the fundamental driver of this.
Yeah. Well, and just to be safe, I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords. Should that come to fruition, I've never been an opponent of Skynet, so just to be safe, gotta gotta play my cards right. You know what I mean?
Just to be on the other side of that, I'm going to start doing pull-ups with Sarah Connors. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, hey, I think we can go ahead and see. Do we have any more questions from chat?
I think we're empty, right?
We'll give folks a second or two to submit those questions. I mean, I really do hope that today's conversation was helpful for folks, especially, just seeing some of the questions kind of roll in about like, is AI going to replace people? And hopefully this calms your nerves a touch. And I think it's important to learn. I think it's going to be. I don't foresee it going away. This isn't going to be a fad that's going to come and go. I think it's going to be a presence, right? So I think it's definitely worthwhile learning, but don't fear the AI. So, all right. Well, with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today on this Bishop Fox webcast. Again, I am joined here today by John Urema, one of my managing consultants, and I'm Zach Moreno, a director of consulting here at Bishop Fox. And hopefully the rest of you have a great rest of your Tuesday, wherever in the world you are, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.